It was horrible, and I felt horrible. I was, I would try to talk to them about it and ask them questions, like questions I shouldn't even be asking, to try to like figure out how could I help their marriage, and what could I give any advice. And I remember asking this doctor, and I was like, "Where does your wife think you are right now?" And he said, "Oh, on lunch break." And even just saying that now, I remember that day, the pit of my stomach, it just, I was a part of the problem. The people behind me were a part of the problem. And I feel so sorry. I feel so bad for those women. I feel so much guilt and pain. And honestly, I don't understand those men. I'm just going to be honest. I don't really understand that. If it's not working and you have to go and betray somebody and go behind their back and pay somebody, and you don't know, you might as well leave the relationship, the marriage. But again,
The problem with that is that you know what will happen once they leave the relationship, or they divorce rather. You know what happens every single time practically. The woman takes all their money, or at least half of it, which you know is still a good amount of money. They take half their money, they take half their stuff, half their assets, half their estate, whatever it is. They just take it. And men don't want to deal with that, obviously. They also don't want to deal with the woman taking the children, because that's how they also get child support. Only to, like, then having split custody because the woman can't handle taking care of the kids themselves most of the time. This is something that they figure out after the fact. You know, I had one such case to like reference from where my mother herself witnessed the breakup between this ex-employer she had. His name was Jim, and he was breaking up with his wife, and Jim, poor guy, made the mistake of being born with depression, and she didn't want to deal. The wife didn't want to deal with his depression and his issues that arose from having depression, you know? And so she divorced him, took half of his stuff, probably more. I think she took more. Got child support. She figured out after the fact that, you know, she's far too neurotic and unstable to take care of the children, and so she would go split custody with him and drop him off at his house for like a weekend, and then, you know, she'd refresh and then get the kids back, and then the cycle would just repeat itself. Um, so you don't understand why. I understand what you're trying to get at, but like you gotta see this from a man's perspective and finances. Like there's nothing that they're getting out of that relationship at this point. And so like whether they would choose between cheating on the wife that doesn't care about them anymore and not losing their stuff, or divorcing and losing their stuff and then not also having money to court a new female, or just pay for sex like they were then. It's yeah, it's not usually a decision most men want to take.
that's not for me to force people. That 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 was one of the worst. I would say the other worst thing was being trafficked to drugs dealers. Yeah, yeah. I hear it from guys I know. I hear this from friends, from guys I used to date, or my partner now that we are together. how OnlyFans is safer than dating, how AI girlfriends never reject you. I've watched men lose themselves to corn because it feels easier than facing real people. And women, we're doing the same thing. Women are just as bad. I mean, we're ghosting for sport, using men for attention we don't even care about. But now it's not just us hurting each other, it's machines. AI girlfriends are already here. I've seen the ads. She listens to you, she won't cheat on you, and people think it's funny and they laugh. But I don't think it is. Because the truth is, humans are parasites to each other. We drain each other, we use each other, we traumatize each other. But here's the part that stings. Who builds the AI girlfriends? Who creates the corn? Who feels trafficking? It's not robots, it's humans. So when humans are trying to say, hey, don't worry, this robot isn't going to hurt you, who's the creator of it? A human. We create the very thing that destroys us. We hurt each other. Then we turn around and design something worse to replace the connection that we ruined. And it feels like a cycle that is never ending. AI girlfriends are just the beginning. What happens when robots replace intimacy altogether? What happens when corn isn't just on screen, but something we can feel, live in, escape to? At some point, we won't need each other at all. And honestly, that really scares me. I don't know if that scares you, but when I think about this and I think about everything that I've learned from men and what I see around me, I feel like I'm holding bricks in my hands. Like, I'm so terrified for the future generation. We are just in a cycle of destruction when it comes to relationships. I think about it a lot, how we ruin each other and call it normal. And it's hard to say this, but after everything I've seen, I don't know if we can stop. We destroy each other for money, for attention, for control, and now we're building things to destroy the little intimacy we have left. The scariest part, we won't even realize how far that we've gone until there's nothing human left to save. I don't have the answers. I'm just someone who's been hurt, trying to understand why we keep hurting each other, why, my own choices, my own decisions, or even my own decisions that were not really mine to make. But there's one thing I know, it's this. If we don't stop seeing each other as disposable, we'll build a world where none of us matter. Because at the end of the day, we can't blame the robots. We can't blame OnlyFans. We can't blame corn. We can't blame trafficking. We can't blame escorts. We build them. We keep all of this stuff going when it's a cycle that we have to be able to close and to stop. And how? I don't know. Maybe having this type of conversation. Like I've said in the past video, I did not go through all of that for nothing. And I'm trying to figure out, what can I do with all that pain? What can I do with the self-betrayal, most of all, the betrayal of my own self? It wasn't just others, it was me, but I betrayed my own self, I allowed people to do things to me. I didn't protect myself. I look back, I have flashbacks, and I think about how I just want to grab myself like 10 years ago and just wrap that girl up and say, you're going to be okay. Like, I got you. I'm going to get you out of this. You're going to be okay. For any man that is watching this, some of you, I understand. Some of you, I don't understand, and that's okay. I know some of you don't understand women, and that's okay. But this isn't a competition of who's worse than the other. We have all been screwed over. I've been cheated on. I've been lied to. I've been screwed over just like many men have. I've been ghosted. And this isn't a competition. We have all been hurt. We hurt each other. So how do we heal each other? I would say what I learned, I went to counseling, tried to work through all that trauma, and I guess sometimes it takes time, but building a relationship with somebody that feels safe and feels close to home, and also taking time to be single, to love myself, and to be my own best friend, because you You are going to be the best friend. No one else will. So if I could give anybody advice, I know how it feels to be screwed over by people that you trusted. And you look at them and you're like, I thought I knew who you were. I never thought you would do something like this to me. I know how that feels. And I've been the villain in this too. So it's all about like healing those inner parts of ourselves that need healing and nurturing ourselves. I think that's where it really starts. Thank you for listening to this video. I hope that this helps. And Happy New Year to everybody. I hope this new year brings a lot of people a lot of healing, peace, and something new, and that you end up getting at least one goal of yours done. Thank you. Happy New Year.
There's something I want to go back to. But she said it was something about she doesn't understand why we're doing this to each other and everything else. You know how you have the term intergenerational trauma? Well, there's also another term that I think should be like implemented into the zeitgeist, or common parlance, common how do you say, the lexicon. It's called intergenerational bitterness. And I'm not gonna say intergenerational trauma isn't a thing, because maybe it is. I don't know. I've experienced some things that make it hard for me to explain exactly where my anxieties arose out of, and like I've had trauma arise in my brain that I'm not sure where it's coming from, and maybe just hearing about past trauma that your predecessors faced, maybe that awakens something in you. I'm not gonna say it's a real thing or a fake thing for certain, because I don't know. I'm in the middle. But like, one thing I could say for certain is actually a thing is intergenerational bitterness. Now, what is that? That is like, you go back in time, right? And at any moment in time, but like, let me set this up. At any moment in time, there's silent agreements between entire generations of people, between the males and the females, right? And this pact, this grouping of agreements, is like something that we send psychically between one another. They're the most subtle of interactions and inferences, because that's the way we work. There's this entire substrate that is occurring in the human mind that none of us directly pay attention to, but a part of us does, and that part of us oversees this substrate of agreements, inferences, and pacts that's going on, and it adapts our character appropriately to that. Now, back in time, men underwent this, what I would call the gentleman era. The gentleman era was like quite obvious what it was. It was like a whole era, I want to say starting around the 1800s, where I think it might have been earlier than that, because this goes back like kind of like toward the Victorian era, kind of, which is like earlier than that. But essentially the gentleman era is just how it sounds. The gentleman era is where men decided to become gentlemanly, which was what is gentlemanly? Well, before that, you were just a man, and no man had like any set of principles or virtues and stuff like that that they needed to uphold consistently throughout time, throughout their life. And when the gentleman came in, that ended because now men were being held to a standard. They're holding themselves to that standard mostly, but the standard was being imposed societally because that's how standards are imposed upon the men, the males. They're societal, society wide. They're societal. Not really something that women have for the most part, by and large, nowadays, but I'll get to that later if I do. But these standards are being posed, and now the gentleman was like a different version. They were like an updated version of the man. The updated version of the man, which was like chivalrous and had virtues and principles, and he had philosophies, and he was a thinking man, and he held the door open for women, and he'd hold the hand of a woman that was trying to, step off of a carriage, and he'd have proper table manners and etiquette and all this stuff. Like all these extra things were being packed on and implemented, instilled in the man. And like as the gentleman became more and more popular and became easier to adapt into other men's, own personalities, it became affluent. It became more, widespread because any man could be a gentleman. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be even really educated. You just have to act and be a certain way. It's the most basic of things to be. It's like you just have to be a gentleman. And it's simple. Anybody can learn to be a gentleman. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be none of that. You just have to abide by these very basic protocols. Now, why do men do that? Well, men were tired of being savages. Mostly. We were tired of being savages. We were tired of being, wrestle a bear with our own arms type of stuff. We going out and hunting constantly and just being big and burly. It's like, you ever notice with the gentlemen, they slim down because you ain't gonna have a big burly dude in a long trench coat like you often see the pictures of the gentlemen with the monocles and top hats. They're not big burly men. They're slim. And they wanted to be something that was softer, and intrinsically you have to soften yourself up to become a gentleman. That's just how it works. You have to soften yourself up. And why are you softening yourself up? Why are you becoming more gentle? Well, for one, like I said, men were just tired of being savages. But the hidden part of it was what? Women were going to do that same thing for men in the future. Because we have that silent agreement of reciprocation. We do a thing, and then we look across the aisle and we say, okay, now you do it. Mirror me back correctly. Time went on. That didn't happen. Something called the feminist movement happened, and we got excited for a bit because we're like, oh, finally, the women are accepting responsibilities and actually implementing themselves into society like we men have been for like the longest time. And then like the vote dropped, and then a very bad hiccup happened right from the get-go, right when they came out of the gate, what happened? They did not require women to sign up for the draft whenever if they wanted to vote. Now, back then, our vision was still hazed with a gentlemanly aura, you know? Because why did we do what? Because people who run Congress back then, obviously, just like they are by and large now, mostly men. Even more so back then. Pretty much all men. They were all men. All gentlemanly men. And what does a gentlemanly man do? He is more. He's more courteous to the female whom he is trying to court. And so when you look in that frame of reference, which is a big grouping of men, Congress is made out of a bunch of people, and there's more people than just Congress that are involved in this legislation, which is the whatever amendment, I forget which number, the one that gave women the right to vote. That was like all of society was involved in that. And so what was that like? That was like all of men trying to court all of women in that one legislation. It was also about civil rights, but it was also about courtship. And so what did they do in their gentlemanly haze that was probably against their better judgment? They did not require women to sign up for draft. That was a big mistake. Because you got to accept a responsibility with a privilege. You have to. You have to, 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 you must. That is how it works. You accept a privilege with the responsibility. Jordan Peterson says this, but it is a truism. It is axiomatic. It is self-evident. You accept the responsibility right along with the privilege that responsibility is granting. And so what did all of men broadcast in that moment to all of women? Oh, we can just keep getting away with this. We can just keep getting privileges without the responsibility. On the hidden substrate level, mind you, because that's where this is all happening. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't probably even think it explicitly, but implicitly they're like, oh, we can just keep getting stuff without having to reciprocate. Oh, okay. Now you come to the modern era. What are women like? You have dating apps that allow for women selecting by height, but no preference for weight. No, there's no setting for weight to to filter by weight. You have women who are taking pride in their body counts. You have women that are hosting live stream events of like fucking 100 dudes in 24 hours. You have women that have commodified their own attention and their own bodies on OnlyFans, and they don't realize what that's doing. That you're commodifying female attention and just the sight of your body. You are commodifying your own form and your explicit focus, and no one thinks how that goes bad. That's one of the main problems. Like, they don't think. They stop thinking. The only time they think is whenever it's something that's explicitly benefits them. The divorce courts are are a joke. Every single time the woman gets it. Every single time the woman gets a privilege without the responsibility. And so, like, how do men then combat that? In whatever way they can. By not caring as much. By disposing of their gentlemanly principles. All that progress undone because the other half is not reciprocating. Why won't women date shorter men? It's a simple question. It is such an insanely simple question. No female has been able to answer it. None. Not a single one. Not a single female can ever give me a clear answer. And that's another problem. No clear answers. With women, they'll just throw up their arms in the air, or they'll just ignore it. They don't really care. But with men, they can only have so many unclear answers before they just fucking lose it, you know? It's like, oh, you don't care? Well, I don't care either. Let me just get rid of this shit. This another one of these gentlemanly principles out the freaking window. How do we get here? Why are we like this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? I'm not going to say it's women's fault, because it's not. It's not just women's faults. But the fault starts on their end. And it ends on their side. You understand? Women aren't reciprocating. Well, fine. We'll find another way to reciprocate. We'll reciprocate trouble with them instead. And that's how that works.